So let's start with a history lesson, and let's talk about Jim Crow. According to the Public Broadcasting Service, they define Jim Crow as the segregation and disenfranchisement laws known as Jim Crow represented a formal, codified system of racial apartheid. That is not a subjective definition. This is a settled definition of Jim Crow in the context of American history. I understand that the Texas State Senate thinks that that's not relevant or necessary to teach, but it is important in the context of understanding present law. Now, Representative Thompson, you were born in Jim Crow, in the era of Jim Crow. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
Now, briefly, what were some of the voting limitations that you know of that targeted black voters during the Jim Crow era?
The black code was one of them because it denied African Americans the right to vote. And then after that came the poll tax. And the poll tax stayed, even after the law was ruled unconstitutional, remained until 1966 in Texas.
Now, Representative, and it's important to know that until 1966, we had apartheid in the racial apartheid, known as Jim Crow, in the United States of America. Now, during that era of Jim Crow, Representative Thompson, as you noted, that includes a polling tax, correct?
Yes, it does.
That includes voter ID laws, stringent voter ID laws back in that time, correct?
Yes.
Citizenship
yes.
checks, correct?
Yes.
Difficult hours to vote during Jim Crow, correct?
Right.
And you had the normalization of white supremacist voters monitoring and intimidating black voters at polling locations during the era of Jim Crow, correct?
That's correct.
Now, let's walk through some of the dangerous measures proposed by your Texas State Republican colleagues and supported by Governor Abbott they're trying to enact today. So the proposed Texas bills, SB 1, HB 3, would set new ID requirements, so voters must provide their driver's license number, or if they don't have one, the last 4 digits of their Social Security or a signed affidavit, correct?
Right.
Now, they would also place a ban on the distribution of mail-in ballot applications, correct?
Correct.
As well as monthly citizenship checks. Monthly citizenship checks for voter registration, correct?
Correct.
They would also ban extended hours during early voting. Is that correct?
For those persons we call essential workers who helped us during the pandemic, yes.
Representative Thompson, this sounds an awful lot like the Jim Crow that you grew up in and were born into. Based on your lived experience, would you say that these proposed voting laws are remnants of Jim Crow? I shouldn't even say remnants, revivals, an attempted revival at Jim Crow?
Absolutely. Jim Crow 3.0.
We are long overdue in a moment of reckoning to make sure that we not only rectify the harms from the past, but allow us to research the potential medicinal applications of these substances. And the first step in doing that is ending and taking down some of these old provisional barriers to research. I present this amendment at the desk today because for a very long period of time, the United States has and continues to uphold obsolete and old provisions from the war on drugs. This provision specifically has for a very long period of time prevented and acted as a barricade to federal research on certain substances such as psilocybin, MDMA, and marijuana, in allowing us to research the applications and potential therapeutic applications of these drugs in the treatment of diseases such as PTSD, addiction, and depression. Representative Yoho put his finger in my face. He called me disgusting. He called me crazy. He called me out of my mind. And he called me dangerous. And then he took a few more steps. And after I had recognized his comments as rude, he walked away and said, "I'm rude. You're calling me rude." I took a few steps ahead and I walked inside and cast my vote because my constituents send me here each and every day to fight for them and to make sure that they are able to keep a roof over their head. I want to be clear that Representative Yoho's comments were not deeply hurtful or piercing to me because I have worked a working class job. I have waited tables in restaurants. I have ridden the subway. I have walked the streets in New York City. And this kind of language is not new. I have encountered words uttered by Mr. Yoho and men uttering the same words as Mr. Yoho while I was being harassed in restaurants. I have tossed men out of bars that have used language like Mr. Yoho's. And I have encountered this type of harassment riding the subway in New York City. This is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? And I do not need Representative Yoho to apologize to me. Clearly, he does not want to. Clearly, when given the opportunity, he will not. And I will not stay up late at night waiting for an apology from a man who has no remorse over calling women and using abusive language towards women. But what I do have issue with is using women, our wives and daughters, as shields and excuses for poor behavior. He gave permission to use that language against his wife, his daughters, women in his community. And I am here to stand up to say that is not acceptable. I do not care what your views are. It does not matter how much I disagree or how much it incenses me or how much I feel that people are dehumanizing others. I will not do that myself. I will not allow people to change and create hatred in our hearts. And so what I believe is that having a daughter does not make a man decent. Having a wife does not make a decent man. Treating people with dignity and respect makes a decent man. And when a decent man messes up, as we all are bound to do, he tries his best and does apologize. Not to save face, not to win a vote. He apologizes genuinely to repair and acknowledge the harm done so that we can all move on.